about the core, thanks Ryan, curriculum. That's your warning that we're recording this today. This is our second session doing the exact same thing. So there'll be two recordings of essentially the same presentation, but I think the chat will be a little bit different in this one. So please do participate as much as you would like. If you feel comfortable turning your video on and chatting with us, please do. Otherwise, you can use the chat box to participate as much as you would like. I will introduce myself and my colleagues real quick, and then we'll dive in. So my name is Jenna Mears. I am a speech language pathologist. I work for Renfrew Educational Services, and I am a member of the Complex Communication Needs team. And that's the capacity in which we're here today presenting to you. So,
hi guys, I'm Margot. I am the other speech language pathologist on the CCN team. So same role as Jenna, just different school.
I'm Janice. I'm the occupational therapist on the team. I'm Ryan. I'm the assistive technology specialist on the team.
Right, so many of you have seen our names and faces about already. Just wanted to make sure that everyone knew who we were. What we're talking about today is a resource that we built for the Calgary Catholic School District in order to help support the language learning of students with complex communication needs in your district. So that's kind of the perspective that we're coming from today. And so I hope that we can make things relevant for you today. What we want to talk about is a little bit of the foundational concepts about why we built this resource, what these things that we're talking about are, a little bit of background on why core words are important in terms of education and instruction and why we want to prioritize them. Then we'll walk through the resource and give you guys some examples of things that are already being done out in your schools already. As I mentioned off the top, if you have questions or anything, please feel free to pop them up when you think of them. I don't mind being interrupted. I really want to make sure that people are sort of understanding the perspective that we're coming from. So please ask your questions. Let's chat about this kind of stuff. So in general, when the complex communication needs team works with you guys out there on the ground, we are coming at this from a perspective of hoping to increase the accessibility of communication at school in educational environments. When we think of the word accessibility, I'm sure that the first idea that pops into your mind is perhaps like a wheelchair user, that like handicap parking stall symbol. So what we do as a complex communication needs team is essentially like we want to be installing ramps towards communication in schools. So making the space accessible for students who might have to access communication in a way different than verbal speech, the same way a wheelchair user accesses a building in a different way than somebody who is ambulatory. So the reason that this is important to us is because the way that people actually learn is through communication. So we're exchanging information and we're engaging in social interactions. That is all communication. And if we have a disability that affects our communication skills, it's going to make it harder for us to learn anything. So through chats with your diverse learning team at CCSD, we've kind of come to this place where we're trying to help people understand that for a student who has challenges in communication, that learning about communication skills and how to use them and listening and speaking and reading and writing can be their priority. So especially in program classrooms, if what we're prioritizing, if sort of our end goals are all around communication, that's perfect. They don't, those math skills, those science skills, those things can all be taught as well, of course, but it's easier to learn things if we're able to communicate about them. So that the top priority for us as special educators can be teaching communication skills. So I think that's kind of a mind shift that we're hoping to help propel throughout CCSD. And when we sort of approach this idea of teaching language to students who perhaps aren't using language already, we have to come at this from the idea that these students do have the potential to learn it. So I think sometimes in special education, we hit roadblocks when we're trying to teach concepts. And we think that the students can't learn them, but we're teaching concepts using language that the student doesn't already have access to. So that's where we kind of get to that point of like, let's teach them the words that they need to know and understand to be able to learn things. And then we can teach them more things. And assume that they have the potential to learn those things if we teach them to them. So if a student isn't learning something, it's probably because we haven't taught them. It's kind of this like circular thing in education. So we're going to presume that all of our students that we work with have the potential to learn language. And that's something that kind of runs as a thread throughout the way we provide services. Something that comes up a lot in conversation with educators, educational assistants, teachers, admin staff is like, okay, but where do we start? Like this kid has no functional language. What are we going like, what do we do? And so that's where we come to this idea of core words. When we talk about the core word curriculum, we're targeting a subset of the 350 words that make up about 80% of what we say. So it's the words that we use the most. It's words that are like the first kind of words that are spoken by kids. And they're words that stick with us throughout our life. So they're words that I've used a ton already in this presentation. Things like that and of and it and they, like, those are all core words. And this idea that there are words that are highly flexible and highly frequent that can be used in all contexts across a variety of subjects is a feature of all spoken languages. So it's something that like is real and tangible. And so that's why we might want to start by teaching these words versus starting by trying to teach like subject specific vocabulary. And actually, Margot, do you want to tell your little story about your kid? Seems like a good point.
Sure. Yes, this just, I decided to share this story last presentation. So I'm a relatively new mom. I have an 18-month-old. He's almost exactly 18 months, like to the day. So he's just starting to communicate verbally a little more functionally. And the example I've noticed, because we think about core words and stuff all the time at work, I'm starting to see this in action with my son as he's learning to communicate. So for example, I do the daycare drop off in the morning and I'm getting him ready and I'm always like, it's time to go. Okay, finish with your toy, then we have to go. It's time to go. You know, we need to go soon. Like all those kinds of things. And I've noticed after like recently, he started to say go now when he sees me kind of like getting ready and moving towards the door, but he's also saying go anytime we're going to go outside. Or anytime his dad's gonna leave for work or anything like that. And then I also noticed like we have a little peekaboo toy in his playroom that says, oh, where'd you go? And he's responding when he hears that and saying go. So he's already kind of incorporating core words, because they are occurring very frequently in our speech, and I'm emphasizing those words without even really thinking about it. But he's also understanding that they're flexible and that they can be used in multiple situations. The other example that I think a lot of kids use is all done. You know, we use that when we're finished meals and when we're finished with toys and whatever. And when he got his 18-month shots last week, obviously that was not his favorite thing. And he said, all done, all done, all done. So again, understanding the power of a flexible core word, and also like, again, that flexibility of being able to use it in multiple situations.
I really like that example because it's like it's live and relevant to our lives now, and it also shows that we're not just making this up. Like this is part of language development research, right? We know that kids learn core words, and we know that core words are powerful and flexible because they start at 18 months or earlier and they stay with us for the rest of our life. That word go remains useful to Margot now at, I won't tell you how many years, but it started at 1, right? She's had that word for her whole life. So when we're talking about making communication accessible to students, having access to those words that are frequent and powerful is really important, because those are the words that they will need to be able to get themselves into and out of any situation they want, right? And we might need to teach those words explicitly. So if you think about the fact that these students with complex communication needs are not using functional language right now, they're not communicating the way we would expect them to. They're using behaviors or whatever to get their messages across. We might have to explicitly teach them the words that they might need to do that. And teaching them the word for their favorite Pokemon is probably, I mean, they probably already know the word for their favorite Pokemon, but what about their favorite Pokemon? Their favorite Pokemon, they lost their favorite Pokemon, or I don't know where it is. Those are all core words. Every single word in that sentence is a core word. Can be relevant, right? So the words that we have references for in the real world, we can teach those too, but if we don't have the little words that go around them to give their sentences meaning, we don't have that communicative autonomy. We can't actually say what we mean about that thing. I might have a very favorite cookie that I love, and so I say cookie, and for like months and months and months, whenever I say cookie, it's because I want a cookie, but now I'm sick of that cookie. But all I know how to say is cookie. I have no way to say no more cookies, stop cookie, different cookie. I don't like cookies anymore. You know what I mean? So I need those core words to be able to make my message completely understandable. Yeah, so we're trying to teach communicative autonomy to these students. And so we need to teach them words that give them that autonomy, meaning they can say whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. The cool thing about core words is that they tend to line up a lot with our sort of like early literacy goals. Most of the words that are on your classic sight word lists, the Dolch and whatnot, are core words. They're high frequency, high flexibility words. And we really believe in language instruction that's supported by literacy instruction. We know that reading and writing and listening and speaking all work together to develop language. So it's an easy way in to teach core words by doing some of the literacy activities that you might already be doing in your classes. We just want to sort of like shift the focus of the things that you're already doing and make them a little bit more accessible. One of the concepts that we've talked about in past presentations that you can find in a variety of places, including your EPD site, is descriptive teaching. And so the idea behind descriptive teaching is essentially that you can talk about higher level, more complex topics using language that kids already have access to and understanding of. So if we've taught core words, those high frequency, high impact words already, we can then talk about concepts like hibernation is the example I used in the last class, using some of those words that kids already understand. So sure, hibernation is a big complex word for a kid in grade 1, but do they know words like winter, like eat a lot and then sleep a long time? For sure. And so those are all high frequency. Most of those are core words. And we're talking about a pretty high level concept and a word that may not be something they can easily repeat to you, but they can at least understand the idea of it. So when you say to them, what's hibernation again? They're like, oh, it's when bears sleep long time. Yeah, that's a perfectly acceptable response to what hibernation is. So that's the idea of if you give kids core words, they can learn about concepts that are even bigger. So we want to build a good foundation of learning using that core vocabulary. There's a question in the chat about English language learners, and I totally agree. I think that teaching core words to students. So we are here from a perspective of those kids with complex communication needs, but a lot of the tools and strategies that we talk about certainly are relevant for a variety of students, right? Not just our students who have augmentative and alternative communication systems. So we will talk about that a little bit, about having core words be the focus, especially in early grades for everybody. And having access to those words in a variety of modes can be really helpful for anybody, including our English language learners, students even with some more general learning disabilities and language delays and things like that. So absolutely. That's where we start to talk about the importance of actually using alternative modes of communication to support those students who have complex communication needs. So their communication needs aren't met just by their verbal speech alone. They require the support of symbol systems or voice output devices, the things that we tend to deal with. But there's lots of stuff that you can do before you even send in a referral to the CCN team. So if you have core boards in your classrooms already, we want to use what's called aided language input. So we want to show kids how to use those systems, right? Students will learn the way that we teach them. So if all we ever do is talk to them, they're not going to be able to learn how to use something like a communication board. We have to show them, give them the input in the way that we're expecting them to give the output. So we use these universal symbol supports for language because we know that that can help the other students as well. And then it can also support and validate the communication mode of a student who might be a user of an alternative or augmentative communication system. Any questions so far? That's kind of the general background. Now we're going to get into a little bit more of our inspiration for this tool that we created for you guys. So Project Core was a research project led by Karen Erickson and Lori Geist. Sorry, I didn't mean to go back. Karen Erickson is a special education teacher and a phenomenal human, a specialist in emergent literacy. And what they did is they essentially did a longitudinal study over 5 years in which they were doing core word instruction for students with cognitive disabilities. So they were using core boards and AAC systems that were already in place. And they were doing shared reading activities, shared writing activities, and all of those things were focusing on core words, kind of like a few at a time. They had that 36 project core board that's been cycling around in CCSD comes from this project. So they took the sort of first 36 core words developmentally, put them onto a core board, and did language instruction using those core words in a variety of different tools, right? So if they had their own AAC systems, they've modeled in those AAC systems, but they also had those core boards for people, for the whole class to see during language instruction times. And the results of that were kind of awesome. So AAC users started using their devices more, presumably because they were seeing their mode of communication being sort of validated and used and modeled to them. They were learning how to use the words that they had access to. There was an increase in reading levels in all of those students. So they had exposure to print. They were doing shared reading and shared writing, and they were learning about the words that they hear all of the time and see all of the time. And then my very favorite result, just the first one listed here, is that in general, all of the students increased their communication acts. So they were spontaneously saying the things that were on their mind in whatever means they had available to them, more than they were before, because they were being shown how their words can be used, right? They were being shown different ways of communicating. And so they started to act out their communication needs in a more meaningful way after that. So we sort of realized that these were all areas that we could maybe help support, especially in the special education classrooms in Calgary Catholic School District. So what we wanted to do is help support teachers and EAs and those people supporting kids with complex communication needs in learning that core vocabulary and doing that instruction of core words, so that you kind of have a foundation of something that you can do even in our absence. So we want you to be empowered to teach these kids language without the need for an immediate referral to the CCN team because you don't even know where to start. So this is what we wanted to do, is give you an idea of where to start. So we compiled a bunch of resources. Because there are tons of resources out there, and the resources will be listed at the end of this presentation. And we have provided some ideas for aided language input using core words and teaching across academic routines. And we sort of hoped to provide you immediate access to a bunch of different options of ways to teach these words for all students in the classroom. Yeah, I'm gonna get into that more. The core word curriculum has built into it a bunch of songs and videos that target kind of one word at a time, a core word, of course. There's ideas for literacy activities. There's ideas for activities to go beyond that literacy activity. So like, we've taught the word, we read the book. How can I keep practicing this word throughout my day? Because you can. And then some just ideas for modeling it in just like those chatty times, right? Like we talk to kids throughout their day. So ideas for expansion activities, like how do I target the word turn in science class? And then ideas for just like, it's my morning routine. I have 5 minutes where I'm just chit chatting with this kid. Can I use that word turn right now? So that's the general idea behind the core word activity, or the core word curriculum. I'm going to show it to you now, but if you have any questions, this would be a good time to pop in while I'm switching gears a little bit. I know that there are a couple of people here who have already used the core word curriculum. So yeah, some of you might be familiar with it. So I'll just go ahead and show you right now what that looks like. Where did it go? There. I have lost it, just 1 second. There it is. Okay, so this is what the core word curriculum website looks like. It's a Google site. I want to right off the bat make you aware of the fact that we do have a PDF version of this available to you as well, right on there where it says core word curriculum. That will take you to a PDF. So it's a summary of everything that's in here in a printable PDF. So thank you, Ryan. That's the link to it in the chat there. So if I go to this core words page, you'll see that it's organized by month. We did that in the event that you really wanted something laid out for you for every single instructional month of the school year. By no means do you have to follow this order. Do you have to do exactly what's in here? Do you have to do month 2 in October? That's not what this is supposed to be. It can be if you want it to be, but you can definitely pick whatever word sort of aligns with what you're doing in class, whatever your theme is, and draw inspiration from that, however you feel you would like. So, sorry, I'm going to go back to that. So if we say, for example, go to month 3, we have, these are the 4 words that we sort of picked to target in there. If you click on the word, you can also do that from this tab up here, the drop-down menu. It's going to bring you to a page that has the symbols for those words in a variety of the language systems that you'll see out there in the world. And there's going to be like built-in links to songs and videos that target that word. You can't touch this. I forgot we put that one in there. That's funny. We tried to pick resources that would be applicable to a wide age range, but it is certainly geared a little bit towards younger students right now, but that's something that we're open to if you find really awesome resources for older kids, feel free to share those with people. And then again, right embedded in there are YouTube videos of books being read. Obviously, if you can find actual books that kids can touch and feel and turn around and turn the pages on, that's good too. That's part of the experience of learning to read for sure. But sometimes it's nice to be able to show the whole class at the same time, each page of the book. So you have the YouTube links in there. Again, if you have other books that happen to target those words, we're doing CAN right now. That's great too. This is just ideas to make it easy so you can get started. Then we have some prompts for the shared writing activity. We do have presentations about a lot of these other topics available. So if you're like, what is predictable chart writing? There's a link right there built in. You'll see the beginnings of predictable chart writing and some videos that we're going to share in a minute. But essentially it's a sentence frame that every kid gets to write the core words that are at the beginning of the sentence, and then they add in their own little twist. So like, what can I do? Or what can we do? And then some ideas for other follow-up activities that you can do. So if you're working on a word, as Erin mentioned, sometimes we just do one word for 2 weeks, depending on the like learning level of the kids, right? So if you're like, okay, we've read every book I can think of that has the word can repeated in it, what can we do next? There's some ideas of other activities that you can do. We have also added in some pre-made board maker activities. So things that are interactive that you can share on your smart screen, and people can take turns doing this activity, or it's something that you can do one-on-one with the student if that's something that is appropriate in their learning context. So there's what the core words look like. Under resources, I will show you, we have the PDF version of it, and we also have printable versions of many core board options under here. So lots of the symbol sets that you're going to see out there in the world, we have core boards that you can print right from here. So we have our lamp words for life, Proloquo to go. This is the word power. This is a 96 cell one. We had some requests for just the word power 60 main page. So perhaps somebody can throw the link to Saltillo website in there if you want more. Erin, I don't know if you have access to BoardMaker with UCSD. I know that lots of you guys have been using lesson picks. I know that Erin, you have specifically been using lesson picks. And that's great too. It doesn't necessarily need to be BoardMaker. Obviously, those activities won't work if you don't have access to BoardMaker, but I have worked with some teachers that have their own BoardMaker accounts, and it's also something that we can support when we're out there too, because we all have access to BoardMaker. But again, we don't want you to wait for us. Go ahead and do these things without us. And yeah, what else is in my resources? Forget. Right, so there's the symbols for each of the words in a bunch of different vocabulary systems. So you have the high contrast symbols, you have our Proloquo symbols or word power symbols. So if you want to be able to have like individually printed versions of each of those symbols, they're available there. There's some more information about predictable chart writing in here as well, which is a really lovely like literacy activity that can be done honestly in any kind of classroom. You get to like build a book together and then read it together and reread it and be authors. And it's just a lovely little literacy activity that's really inclusive for students with complex communication needs. And then I also want to draw your attention to the professional development tab, which is where a bunch of these presentations that we've already done are recorded for you. So there's the handouts and the actual presentations are embedded in there. So for some relevant topics that we've presented on before. This one, complex communication needs in the curriculum, is a good place to sort of start. to expand your ideas in terms of how you can support kids with complex communication needs in general education classrooms and special education classrooms. So yeah, that's kind of a general overview of what the core curriculum looks like. I think this would be another good place to pause because I would like to get into sharing some experiences that we've had out in the world of people already starting to implement this. Erin, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to show a little quick clip of you in your class, and then maybe you can speak to how you've been doing things in your classroom. I think it's valuable for teachers to hear from other teachers. Thanks. All right. So this is Erin in her EST class being awesome. Oops.
Enormous shout. Robot, stop! Robot, stop! Leo! Robot! Stop! Robot, stop! Milan!
My very favorite thing about this video is that you hear students verbally participating as well as students pointing. You can hear people tapping on things. You can hear alternative communication systems being used. It's perfect. It's just a short video, but I think it's beautiful. So I don't know, Erin, if you'd like to speak to what you've been doing, that would be great.
Yeah, we use videos quite a bit. I have a chart on my wall with all of the 36 core words. And so what we do is I take them down and they're about 6 inches big. And so we walk around with them a lot and have the kids point to them. So whenever we do the stories, we're taking them down and having the kids interact with the stories that we're reading and having them practice using the core words in the stories, and that's been really successful. They've really enjoyed anything related to the videos. They've just really enjoyed. Most are able to say the core words. I do have some that point to the core word. I have a couple that use their devices to say the core word that we're doing. But it's all about just getting a lot of practice of that core word that we're using in that particular week, just saying it over and over and over again. And that's kind of where we're at with it right now.
I think it's fantastic. I'm going to share something else that you built, your little Go book, which I think is awesome. Because that's exactly it. We all learn by repetition, and we know lots of the kids that we work with require a lot of repetition. So this is built-in lesson picks. That's totally cool. These are not symbol sets that are on the core word curriculum, but that is okay because, as Erin said, everybody's getting a chance to use the words anyways, right? And you're showing in the kids' systems where that word is and making connections between this version of Go and the version of Go that's in their talker, and maybe a version of Go that's on a different core word. So I think that's awesome. So I'm going to explain what this is, but you can pop in anytime if you want, Erin. So there's actually associated with this book, there's like a bunch of like actual cutouts of the symbol for Go that you saw on that main page there. And so the kids can like fill in the blanks and build their own little Go book. When I want to leave, I can say let's, and then they have the opportunity to say go and put the word go in there. And then you can read the book again after it's finished. And I think that's really cool. And there's a lot of like variety in the reasons that we might need to use the word go. And I think that's really key too, is you kind of get the sense of flexibility of the word go from this little book that she's built.
I like that it's explicit too, because I think it speaks to, I don't know you, Erin, but it sounds like you've got a lot of kids who use oral speech in your room. And so what I like about the explicit aspect is you're reaching all levels of kids there. So the kids who, from a social and a meta-linguistic perspective, can understand, I can say this in this context, are benefiting from that, but also your students who are still learning to use these words at all or in any context are going to benefit from that book too. So I really love this resource in that you can kind of move across the spectrum of where kids are at in terms of learning to use the word in their own communication.
Totally agreed. So that, did you build this book on Listen Picks, Erin? Did you do it
No,
yourself?
it's one I found. I just mentioned in the chat that Lesson Picks does have a lot of those resources, but it's a lot of digging, I find.
Yeah.
Which if yeah.
Another good resource to find pre-made books like this is Tar Heel Reader. One of my colleagues can perhaps put a link into, you need a subscription to it, but it is, or you just need like a username, it's not paid, but you can search by keyword in Tar Heel Reader and find books. So it's essentially like it's a platform for people to build books online, kind of like Google Slides. And it's really good. You can actually search by keyword and see if you can find books that are already pre-made. Lots of SLPs use this site. So there's lots of core word books that we have built and shared with each other. So it can be a lot of digging for sure. And that's part of why we wanted to provide you with some like ready to go resources already. But also, like, guys, I have never met people more resourceful than teachers, honestly. So use whatever resources you have. If you're comfortable looking in lesson picks, then that's great. If you have stuff already on hand, check out your library that you have already. Probably there's books that target core words, and maybe that's how you choose the word that you're going to focus on for that week, right? You're like, I don't know, this book that I have on hand has the word yes in it a lot. That's a core word. We'll use this book. You know what I mean? So be creative, use the resources that you already have. And I think that that's something to think about when, I think that we have a high school teacher here today. If we're working with kids with complex communication needs at those higher levels too, I know that probably you're going to access core words in a different way. So use this as inspiration for like, these are times that I can use this word with my student. And then think about how many times you might say that word in a social studies class, right? Maybe a word like place or go or come could be relevant to a social studies class. So think about those kinds of things. Yeah, okay. So I think that I'm going to turn it over to Margot now to do some sharing of a video that she has of this in class. Because I think that this will, I just got a question about this being for EAs. So we recognize that there were going to be EAs here today for sure. And we just want you to sort of understand the like theory behind where all this is coming from. And so when your teachers start to do stuff like this with the students, you can support them, right? So Margaret's going to show you some like whole class context of using the core word curriculum and how you can be a support to the teacher. If you are an EA who's working with a student in gen ed, so you're kind of doing a lot more one-on-one with them, you can definitely still access this core word curriculum for that student. You know what I mean? If you're doing pull-out activities with a kid, you can draw from this core word curriculum to do that pull-out work with a student. So if you have more specific questions, please let us know. But I think that some of what Margot will show you now can be enlightening in terms of your job as an EA.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you said that about just the older kids and gen ed and stuff like that. Like, I do think there are lots of ways this could be tweaked to support pull out time or even one-on-one time during classroom lessons where you're thinking like, okay, this is the unit or the lesson for you know, science or social studies or math or whatever it might be, but maybe the EA with that student has pre-planned with the teacher what core word makes sense for that lesson, and you're just kind of tweaking the focus so that they're still part of the overall lesson, but you know, you can pull some of these activities to pre-teach or support during the lesson. But yes, thinking about full classrooms and realistic classrooms, I will just share my screen and my sound. Here. Okay, are we good this time, guys? So this is an ES2 class in Monsignor Neville Anderson. I'll just turn the sound off while I'm talking and it gets started. So Ryan was leading this lesson. We did a little bit of a shared reading activity followed by a predictable chart rating activity. So Ryan was leading the lesson. That's my scrunchie you just saw there. I'm supporting a little bit with some of the students specifically, and then the teacher and the EAs are all present. So everybody is modeling on something. You can see quite a few kids have these word power flip books. There's a few kids who have a core board, and there are a few kids that have devices as well. And that's not to mention there are a couple of verbal kiddos in there as well. So we started out, Ryan with modeling. You can see split screen is a great tool if you're going to be using the videos, because it allows you to model on, this is called Chat Editor, which is an emulator program for word power. So she's got this story.
Margot, can you just mute the sound while you're talking? I'm having a hard time hearing you over the video sound.
Sure, yeah, okay. So I was just saying that Ryan's using split screen here, which is a really great strategy for if you're going to be modeling something while you're doing the story or watching a video. So she's using something called Chat Editor, which is an emulator program for word power vocabulary sets. So yeah, you can see our core word is help, and she's modeling that while we're reading the story. So I'm just going to let it, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to the end of the story and the beginning of the activity.
So our speaker is bad. I just put in a request. I don't know if it'll get fixed or not. That's okay. That's okay.
They needed to help get the cat out of the tree. Okay. Help. We're gonna write our sentences. Everybody's gonna get a turn. We're gonna talk about what I need help to do. Jaden, do you want to help me?
Jaden,
Can you help me? Come help. Go help Brian. Help. Come help me. Brian needs help. Okay. So we're gonna pick a word. I need help to make an action word. I need help to. What do you need help with? To pull. Sure.
yeah, good choice. Good job, Jaden. Nice participation.
Who wants to go next? Parker.
Good job, Parker.
Parker's gonna come help me.
Parker, can you get the house started?
Good job, Parker. Okay, Parker. Our sentence is, I need help to. What do you think you need help with? Action? What do you need help to do? Like how you're thinking about what you're gonna do.
You need help to learn or to swim?
You need help to sleep.
I do too sometimes. Sometimes I need help to sleep.
Marcus, your turn. Your turn.
Which one?
Help to swim?
Swim. Good one.
Sometimes I need help to swim too.
Great choice. Okay. Oh, Oliver's ready. I see your hand up. Oliver, come help me. Come help me. Oliver, do you want to use your talker? Do you want to use your talker or this one? He likes using those. Use that one? Yeah. I need help to go to the library.
Nice look, everybody. We're talking about what we help to do.
You too. You need help this way just like Marcus.
Hold on, your turn.
Nice writing. Rebecca, you need help. Nice, Oma.
Right?
Nice telling us, Oma.
Jason,
You guys are such good writers.
good job. What's the language help for?
To tell. Yeah, that's your favorite.
Ready, let's try again. One finger. One finger.
You reach up there pretty high. What do you need? Help. Are you looking up at the top? I wonder if you're
You need help to dance?
You guys don't have one of those pointer finger things, do you? Help to dance. Rebecca, what do you need
He
help
doesn't like
to do?
touching the smartboard without it actually, so it's good timing.
What do you like? What do you need help to do? Help?
We have to sit.
What action?
Draw, that's good.
Those are both good
Do
choices.
you need help to color or to draw?
Nice telling us.
Misha.
Jason, it's Michelle's turn. Your help.
Do you have regulate on there? Please help. Help. That's right. Help to what?
Your choice. Let's pick one more. Do you need help to sit? Do you want to try on the iPad, bud? You want to tell me on the iPad? What do you need help to do?
That's your turn. Almost like, I want to help you.
What do you need help to do? I wonder. We'll think about our answer over here.
Okay, I'm gonna stop there in the interest of time. But a couple things to kind of highlight about that video. One was that, as you can see, that is a busy classroom with a lot of kids with a lot of needs. We saw a lot of different seating, different sensory tools. For this group, sitting in desks wasn't the route for this particular activity. But everyone still got a turn. Every single classmate got a turn with that activity. And I think we see in our in a lot of special needs classrooms, you're going to have friends who tend to be the ones who go first. That's great. They tend to be great peer models. And we almost sort of worked through kids who were going to be more and more reluctant to participate. So that a couple other kids to highlight, the girl in the tube you saw that used the pointer, that was a nice option instead of touching the screen. That student's also able to answer verbally, and that would have been acceptable, but she wanted to use chat editor to answer. The other kid who had his own system, which is different than Touch Chat with Word Power or Word Power vocabulary set, he uses Proloquo to go. But again, he wanted to choose to use the same system that everyone else was using for his answer. So how we supported that was allowing him to use that method, but then modeling the language on his own system so that he would be able to still learn from that for his own language system. And then that last friend, you know, answering on the smartboard was becoming not super functional for him. And so that's why we kind of decided, okay, we're going to try a different method. But I think the important thing to remember there is that, you know, he came away with me and looked at the iPad and took some time to process. And you could see Ryan was very patiently kind of waiting for his response and still wrote his name down and was ready for his response. And he did actually generate a response. It took a while, but he did actually generate a response. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, because I think sometimes those particularly busy friends, you know, when we have that initial response to a group activity, we might tend to say, oh, they're not interested, they're not engaged, it's too hard, or things like that. But I think it's really important to remember that we don't know that necessarily. You know, there might be a lot of things going on in their body and their brain that are making it hard for them to participate, but we don't necessarily know that they don't A, understand, and B, want to participate. So we need to presume that potential and that interest. But also, even if they don't understand, they're still going to be able to be a part of the group. They're going to be able to get that exposure to language and to literacy. They're going to get an opportunity to be a writer. And even if their response doesn't make a lot of sense in our brains, it's still allowing them to autonomously communicate what they wanted to communicate. So, you know, just taking the time to, it is possible with tweaks. It doesn't have to look perfect, you know, but you can try, we can try and find ways to support every single student with taking turns in these activities. And I think, oh, and one more point, sorry, is that all the adults were engaged in that activity as well. Everybody was modeling on something and supporting somebody, and that was hugely helpful in making this activity a success.
That was exactly what I was just going to say, is that like the team approach to that lesson is part of what made it completely successful, right? Is that like everybody knew ahead of time what the core word was going to be. So that gives EAs and teachers and even the students that can be peer models the opportunity to be like, to find that in the device that they're using and modeling on. So I think that idea of just like, okay, this is what we're doing for as long as it takes, and that's okay, and everybody's going to participate, is so powerful. Yeah, and so that's when we're talking about sort of the role of EAs in something like this. That's it, right? Is like communicate with your teachers and figure out, okay, so our goal for this activity is to target the word help. Okay, this kids are going to learn the word help. So even if the kid doesn't like sit and listen for the entire thing, and even if they don't touch the core board at all, if you're there and you are showing them we're talking about help, you point to help 85 times in that 20 minutes, that's good. That is supportive, that's teaching, that's language learning, that's exactly what we're looking for, right? So yeah, you being engaged and everybody sort of participating in the activity together is the goal in that case.
I think, yeah, sorry, Jen, I was just going to say again, to kind of emphasize that point, input is working on language and communication and learning. I think that's something that can be challenging. We're thinking, oh, they're not talking, and we need to make them say it, and we need to make them take a turn and all that kind of stuff. But just and I think that helps us feel like we're doing something and that they are improving and it's measurable. But just this is kind of your friendly reminder that you are working on language if you are modeling language, that is supporting the child, and that is going to be helpful, even if they're more of a side eye kind of friend and they're not kind of like doing this. Having the whole group do it and having that word repeated over and over and over again, they will latch on to the repetition and to the visual support and all those kinds of things.
You guys have any questions, any things you want to chat about for the last 2 minutes here? I'm just gonna.
It's Jenna. I was just gonna ask, we have a few nonverbal students in grade 2 that are using LAMP. And I love the story and the split screen. Would that be something you could do with the typical, like a regular ed class, and model it that way?
Yeah, 100%. And I love your openness to that idea, Jen. I know we've had a lot of chats about this, but I think absolutely, especially in those early grades, it makes a lot of sense to have that visual support. You saw that one kid that Margot mentioned, it like is actually quite verbal and could have completed that sentence using her own voice. But she wanted to use the language prompts that were on the screen. So absolutely, if you wanted to use that as a way to practice language in grade 1 and 2 and wherever, I think it's totally appropriate. Doing predictable chart writing in grade 1 and 2 is a really lovely way to practice. And something that I wanted to mention was that like an activity like that could be done where the students actually write in their answer themselves too. So in this case, that wasn't an expectation of the students. We were using an alternate way to be writers. But if it was developmentally appropriate for those students in a Gen Ed 1 or 2 class to actually write in the blank and then write their own name after it, it gives even more agency to that. So a student like the ones that you're speaking of, I know one of them would be able to like choose her response from the device and then write it physically on the chart herself. So that could be a cool way for her to actually participate in something that the rest of the class is doing. The other student, I don't know that that would necessarily be a thing, but maybe he could copy it. And either way, it doesn't really matter, because if he has an opportunity to provide a response, then he's done a thing that the whole class has also done. So that's a great idea. I love that. Good question. And I know that they are LAMP users. That program chat editor, it does actually have the ability to emulate the LAMP language organization system as well. So either that one or the Empower software that Janice put in the chat would be useful for those teachers. I might lean towards chat editor just because it has the flexibility of being able to emulate both the word power language sets and the LAMP language sets, but great question. Very, very accessible of you, accessibility minded of you to think about using those kinds of language supports in a Gen Ed class. I like that. And the other thing is, even if you don't use the emulators in a Gen Ed classroom, you could still have a big core board up at the front, right? It speaks to that idea of you never know who might benefit from the support of visual supports for language, right? Okay, I think that we're out of time. It's probably lunchtime for most people. I did put the survey in the chat, so if you guys can make sure you complete that before you go. I'll just maybe share my screen for one last second so you can see our contact information. Show you our references, and then by all means, there's our references. Have a wonderful lunch and a wonderful rest of your day. That's how you reach us.